Deep, very serious.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Deep Dive True Crime. Today we have two updates regarding cases involving the 2014 murder of FSU law professor Dan Markel. The first update, which I'm going to give, regards the case of State of Florida versus Donna Adelson. The second update is going to be done by a colleague on the team, and it regards the appeal involving Katherine Magbanua. In essence, the conviction against Katherine Magbanua has been affirmed. That will come towards the second half of this video. In the first half of the video, we will give you an update about the one of the dumbest filings we have ever seen in a case. It is an affidavit that was filed in support of the motion for change of venue. The affidavit is signed by a defense attorney, a criminal defense attorney. His name is Anthony Bajowski. He has appeared on this channel. He was one of the lawyers, one of the trial lawyers that handled the trial of the five, one of the defendants in the murder of Hoyt Burge. So, Anthony Bajowski, a long-term criminal defense attorney here in Tallahassee, he has filed an affidavit in support of the motion to change venue. We call it the dumbest filing we have ever seen because it is so conclusory and so it just senseless that this guy. Let me read it to you guys first, and then we'll talk about it. So let's read it. Affidavit of Anthony Bajowski in support of defendant's motion for change of venue. 1. I have practiced law in Tallahassee, Florida for more than 50 years, and a large portion of my law practice has been criminal trial work, both as prosecutor and defense lawyer. 2. I have represented individuals charged in both state and federal court with criminal offenses ranging from misdemeanor battery, drug trafficking, and first-degree murder. 3. I read the Tallahassee Democrat and other newspapers on a daily basis and frequently talk with others in our community concerning all types of cases of public interest. Note, no indication of how many others he's talking about here. 4. Because I'm a lawyer that has handled criminal cases for many decades, many people talk with me to give my input and viewpoint on different cases that pique their interest. Again, many people without describing how many people. 5. The cases that are related to the death, murder of Dan Markel, specifically Luis Rivera, Sigfredo Garcia, Katherine Magbanua, Charles Adelson, and now the present case with Donna Adelson, have all been discussed in the community with great interest. Again, what community is he talking about? There's no specificity about the number of people that he has any knowledge about. Any affidavit has to be based on personal knowledge, just so you know. All right, 6. I'm very much aware that just about anyone in the Leon County area that reads a newspaper or watches the local news has watched and discussed this case with each other. How does he know that? Does he talk to every single person that has read the newspaper or watched the news in Tallahassee or Leon County? Interesting. 7. The amount of news coverage, especially the repeated news coverage on this case for the past 10 years, has rendered nearly impossible for any member of this community that is selected as a juror to set aside their prior knowledge of this case and only consider the evidence submitted during the trial. This is an absurd statement, in my opinion. With all due respect to Mr. Bajowski, but that is completely conclusory and of no value whatsoever. 8. Based upon my lengthy practice and residence in Leon County, a county that has a population, probably over 200,000 more, I should check that. Based upon my lengthy practice and residence in Leon County, as well as the breadth of knowledge possessed about the case by members of the community, again, how many members, I do not believe that a Leon County juror can be impartial in this case. All right, so Mr. Bajowski thinks that the venue should be changed. Let's just do it because he thinks so. 9. If potential jurors were truthful, it would be impossible to seat an impartial jury. Sorry, but this affidavit is a joke, and that's the only filing that we've seen today from the defense or from anyone in the case. So now let's turn to the case of Katherine Magbanua. Here's my colleague.
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive True Crime. Katherine Magbanua was convicted in 2022 of being involved in the murder of FSU law professor Dan Markel, a murder that happened back in 2014. She was the convicted now middle woman, the person who helped facilitate the murder, in essence, hiring her ex or the father of her two children to commit the murder. At the time that she did that, she was the girlfriend of Charles Adelson, who is the brother of the ex-wife of the victim. The victim was Dan Markel. He had been married to Wendi Adelson. The two had gotten divorced. The divorce was acrimonious. The family wanted Wendi to be able to move to South Florida from Tallahassee. So the state proved in Katherine Magbanua's case that the family of Wendi Adelson, known specifically, but the family in general, had hired through Katherine Magbanua two hitmen. Well, one, Sigfredo Garcia, for sure, and maybe Sigfredo added another person, Luis Rivera, as help without the knowledge of the Adelsons, but at least one person, right? So their conviction was for the conspiracy to commit the murder, for the murder, and for solicitation to commit the murder. That's the conviction of Katherine Magbanua that was on appeal, and it has just been affirmed. Of course, Katherine Magbanua has been a state witness now for quite some time. She testified in the Charles Adelson trial for the state. Now she is planning to testify again in Donna Adelson's trial in the hopes of getting a reduction to her sentence. But at the same time, there was a pending appeal that has been pending for quite some time at the First District Court of Appeal on the state of Florida from that conviction for which she was sentenced to life in prison. So now the appellate court finally has issued an opinion, and I'm going to read the opinion to you. But the bottom line is this. The opinion discusses the issues raised by Katherine Magbanua, all of them centered around Wendi Adelson and the efforts to take the deposition of Wendi Adelson and to prepare for her cross-examination. We discussed this issue and the case on appeal before and thought that there was very little chance of success. Now there's an opinion that, in essence, affirms the conviction, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it to you all so you have the full story directly from the court. The opinion was issued on July 2nd, 2025. The opinion was written by Judge Roberts and the two concurring judges on the three-judge panel were Judge Bilbrey and Judge M.K. Thomas. Here's the opinion. Now I'm going to begin just reading. Here we go. Following a second jury trial, appellant Katherine Magbanua appeals her convictions for first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and solicitation to commit murder arising from her involvement in the shooting death of Florida State University law professor Daniel Markel in July 2014. For the reasons below, we affirm Magbanua's convictions. I'm going to start reading that again. Following a second jury trial, appellant Katherine Magbanua appeals her convictions for first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder arising from her involvement in the shooting death of Florida State University law professor Daniel Markel in July of 2014. For the reasons below, we affirm Magbanua's convictions. Magbanua makes three arguments on appeal. First, she argues that the trial court erred by not evaluating the Fifth Amendment assertions made by Markel's ex-wife, Wendi Adelson, during her deposition. Before the first jury trial, which ended in a mistrial back in 2019, Magbanua deposed Wendi Adelson. A transcript of the deposition is not part of the record, but the trial court reviewed the transcript evaluated Adelson's Fifth Amendment assertions and concluded that Adelson's counsel made a good faith effort to separate out questions that he could advise Wendi Adelson to answer from those he was concerned were suspect, citing to a case Eller Media Company versus Serrano, which says the following, open quotations, following the invocation of the Fifth Amendment privilege, the trial court determines the propriety and good faith of the invocation. The court then determines whether the responses to the questions posed will potentially implicate the party asserting the privilege, close quotations. Although McBanua takes issue with the trial court's conclusion, without a deposition transcript, the record is inadequate to demonstrate reversible error, citing to Gaspard versus Innocent and quoting, it is well established that in appellate proceedings, the decision of a trial court has the presumption of correctness and the burden is on the appellant to demonstrate error, so the lack of a trial transcript or a proper substitute results in a record that is inadequate to demonstrate reversible error and requires affirmance. Second, McBanua argues that the trial court erred in granting Adelson's motion for protective order to quash the subpoena for her appearance at the deposition. This argument is moot after this court dismissed McBanua's petition for writ of certiorari to quash the order, citing to their own opinion in McBanua versus State, 281 Southern 3rd, 523, Appellate 1st DCA 2019. The trial court granted her motion for reconsideration and Wendi Adelson was deposed. See Goodwin versus State, quoting, an issue is moot when the controversy has been so fully resolved that a judicial determination can have no actual effect. Close quotations. Third, McBanua argues that the trial court erred in not Third, McBanua argues that the trial court erred in not granting the state's motion in limine to prohibit McBanua from calling any witness, including Wendi Adelson, for the purpose of the witness invoking the Fifth Amendment. The state requested that certain procedures be followed, including that the trial court make a pretrial ruling on what questions McBanua could ask Adelson as a defense witness. So because McBanua did not join in the state's motion, she cannot now complain that the trial court erred in not granting the motion, citing Credit Industry Company versus Remark Chemical Company, and quoting, the general rule on appeal to review proceedings of an inferior court is that a party to the cause may appeal only from a decision in some respect adverse to him. And a little explanation here. So the issue is that was a state's motion in limine, not McBanua's motion in limine. So if she wanted the same kind of relief that the state was asking for, she should have asked for it. And if she didn't, she can complain that the trial court erred in denying that request. Going back to the opinion. Additionally, during the second trial, after Adelson's counsel advised that Adelson would unequivocally invoke her Fifth Amendment right to any question asked of her unless she was under a state subpoena, the trial court properly ruled that she could not be called as a defense witness, citing Ashley versus State, which holds that neither the state nor the defense may call a witness that the party knows will invoke the Fifth Amendment and refuse to testify. Based on the record before us, McBanua has not demonstrated prejudicial error, citing to a statute and quoting, prejudicial error means an error in the trial court that harmfully affected the judgment or sentence. It also continues, In preparation for the second trial, McBanua had the benefit of not just Wendi Adelson's deposition testimony, but also her testimony from the first trial, citing to the court's prior opinion, the McBanua petition for writ of certiorari case, and quoting from that opinion as follows. And even though Wendi Adelson could invoke her Fifth Amendment privilege in response to any questions posed in the deposition, the very invocation of the privilege by Wendi Adelson in response to specific questions may inform McBanua's trial preparation, close quotations. During the second trial, McBanua was able to thoroughly cross-examine Wendi Adelson, and Wendi Adelson answered all questions asked by Katherine Magbanua through her lawyers. Affirmed. So bottom line is that Katherine Magbanua still has other post-conviction avenues to try to get a new trial. She could file a motion for post-conviction relief alleging ineffective assistance of trial counsel by failing, for example, to join the state's motion, if that's what they really wanted, or also file a motion for ineffective assistance of appellate counsel for failing to include a transcript of the deposition of Wendi Adelson into the record. So she could do some things. Those are really super hard to win. So if a direct appeal is hard, then any post-conviction motion for relief alleging ineffective assistance of counsel, trial counsel, or appellate counsel, those are even much harder to win. The standard is very difficult to meet. But she still has the hope of a reduction in her sentence from her cooperation with the state. So that's the update in the case of State of Florida versus Katherine Magbanua, and in one of the many cases involving the murder of FSU law professor Dan Markel. Thanks for watching. As always, you can count on us for full coverage of every development in this case. And be sure to check out the new channel, Dan Markel's Murder Saga. That's the third channel where we're going to be transferring some of the main videos from the Dan Markel case over there to have one channel fully dedicated just to those materials. So even though, for example, we may have some videos that we put on Deep Dive True Crime and leave up for some time, and eventually we make them members only, we may select some of those to put on the new channel. So be sure to subscribe to Dan Markel's Murder Saga. Thanks for watching Deep Dive True Crime.
Well, since 3 arrests were made. Because if you'll see, in 2016, Garcia and Rivera were arrested. In 2016, Miss McBanua was arrested. Sure, you're all wondering what's going on with the Adelsons, right? Donna, she's probably at home watching TV, probably watching this trial. Charles Adelson, arrested a month ago. A month ago. His lawyer is in here right now, back there, watching, taking notes, preparing for whenever Charlie's going to go to trial. Wendi Adelson, the state is going to give her immunity to come and testify in this case for them. Watch her, members of the jury, because she thinks she's going to be able to put on a fantastic performance, but that's all it's going to be, is a performance. Because what you are going to see is not only does she have a motive to protect her family, including her brother, who is now arrested, but she also has a motive to protect herself.
Yeah, right?
I'd been advised by my lawyer not to read it.
All right. Now, we're not talking about reading stuff. There's podcasts,
Also not to listen.
TV shows,
Also not to watch.
articles.
Don't read.
And so you've made the decision. Now, you're a lawyer yourself too, right?
I am.
And you made the decision, I'm not going to look at any of this stuff.
Correct.
I don't want to know what happened to the father of my 2 children.
Not I don't want to know what happened.
How can you say you love those boys if you don't care who killed the father that they loved?
Of course I care who killed the father that they loved.
Then why won't you look at the stuff?
I've been advised not to.
Are you afraid that when you look at it, you're going to realize that your brother did this?
I am not afraid of that.
Now, of course, you've, and we won't get into privileged communications, but you've spoken to your lawyer about the case.
How are we not getting into privileged communications? Yes, I've spoken to my lawyer about the case.
You're very intelligent. You have one of the top defense attorneys in the country, former federal prosecutor, John Lohr, right there in the blue suit, right?
He is my attorney.
You're telling me with all of this at your disposal, your intelligence, his experience, and all this information, that you don't care to find out who it is that killed Professor Markel?
This is not that I don't care to find out. My job is to take care of those boys, and that is what I do. I don't see how it helps take care of them to go reading and watching and soaking up all of the horrible information that's out there.
You don't realize that you could be helpful in finally untangling this to give this jury the truth about what happened to Professor Markel?
I have been nothing but helpful since this started.
To what happened to their son? By you looking at it, you are at the center of all this, but you won't look at anything to help in the process.
I've done nothing but help in this process.
You came here and testified.
I came here and testified. I spoke to the police for 6 hours without anyone present. I signed over my cell phone, my car, my house, everything, my computer. What else do I have or know that you haven't seen?
You came here because you were subpoenaed and had no choice.
Correct.
Right?
This is not fun. I would not do this by choice.
You've been inconvenienced.
I've not been inconvenienced.
Professor Markel was shot in the head.
I'm not complaining about being here. This is my duty. I'm here.
We'll get back to you complaining about being here. Do you honestly expect this jury to believe that you haven't confronted your brother about all of this?
Yes, I do.
Yes, you did confront him?
Yes, I do expect them to believe that I did not confront my brother because I didn't.
Or maybe you don't need to because you know the truth in this case. You already know it. That he went behind your back, right?
Did not happen.
Just like he has done with past boyfriends. He's done that in the past where he's gone behind your back when you were having problems in a relationship and dealt with it himself.
No.
Miss Adelson, you understand that until you expose your brother what he did, that everybody's going to consider you as guilty. You understand that, right?
What is the question that you're asking me?
You understand that until you expose your brother and explain what he did, that he went behind everybody's back, that he hired a hitman to murder your ex-husband, you'll remain guilty in the eyes of the world.
I can't speak to the eyes of the world. I can only know that I have done nothing wrong.
Or maybe you are guilty.
I am not
You are
guilty.
guilty.
I am not
You are
guilty.
guilty.
I am not
You are
guilty.
guilty.
I am not guilty.
So, a witness in this case, and I'm not going to get into their testimony, but one of the hitmen, the convicted hitman, implicates you. On July 17, 2014, the day before the murder, the morning before, he says that you were walking on Trescott with the two boys, that you walked down the driveway and into the house.
That never happened.
Right, because Professor Markel, Professor Markel, he had the kids. Based on the way that your guy's schedule was, on that day, he would have had the children in the morning, and you're going through such a bad divorce, you wouldn't be at his house, right?
I wouldn't be at his house anyway, but not because we were going through a bad divorce. At that time, things were pretty copacetic.
All right, so we're coming back to maybe you do know, or maybe you were involved.
Excuse me? What's the question that you're asking me?
I'm giving you a header of what we're talking about so that it will ease you in the question, okay? I'm just telling you what the topic that we're on, so we'll get to a question. Now, the government asked you about a time that you met Miss Magbanua. It was actually spring break of March 2014, right?
I believe so.
You went down to Miami. You stayed with your brother, Charles.
I went down to Fort Lauderdale after being in Immokalee and stayed with my brother.
You then went to Miami Beach to Yardbird and had dinner outside with your boyfriend at the time, or who you were dating, Jeffrey Lacasse. Katherine Magbanua was there, and your brother, Charles Adelson, and you all ate outside, right?
We did.
And that's on Miami Beach, not in Fort Lauderdale.
Correct.
Now, just for context, Jeffrey Lacasse, he was also an FSU professor, not at the law school, but an FSU professor. Nice guy, right?
I don't think so now.
Now, you deny, I'm assuming, that on July 13, 2014, you told Jeffrey Lacasse that Charles looked into hiring a hitman. You deny that, or you admit that?
I deny that.
And that you told him that Charles looked into hiring a hitman back in September of 2013.
That never happened.
which would have been months before your brother even met Katherine Magbanua.
I don't remember when they met.
Letting you know the topic we're on, we're talking about you being involved. That same week, earlier in the week, you sent an email. We're talking about the week of the murder now, not spring break, the week of the murder, not Yardbird, the week of the murder. You sent an email to Jeffrey Lacoste saying that you wanted to break up, that you needed space, right?
I did.
Sent him a long email. Stay away. We're broken up. Right?
I did.
You knew that on July 18, 2014, Jeffrey Lacoste was leaving town to go on a trip, right?
I knew he was leaving at some point that week. I don't remember when.
You knew that he was leaving on the same day of the murder at the same exact time as the murder.
I don't think I did.
11 a.m. on July 18, 2014.
I don't think I knew when he was leaving town.
It's a good way to put the blame onto somebody else. You'd agree on that, right? If it happened, it would have been a good way to put the blame on somebody else.
I have no idea when he was going to leave town.
Your interview, July 18, 2014, you said, my brother, he joked about hiring a hitman. Perhaps that was you just planting a seed to divert the attention of law enforcement away from you.
It was not.
Let's jump off topic right now and talk about your boys' names. That in the time after the murder, you changed their last names from Markel to Adelson, right?
A year later, yes.
Why?
I was scared
Of what?
of someone coming to attack them.
So it's a year later, you won't look at anything because you don't want to know what's going on in the case. And the thought is, well, they're going to be protected if they have my last name and not Markel, right?
Yes.
Now, years later, arrests are made. It's clear who committed the murder, Sigfredo Garcia Luis Rivera. The Adelson name has been dragged through the mud. Why haven't you continued to protect your boys and changed the name back?
I will be changing I'm not going to change the name back. I don't think that will help. One day I'll change all of our names.
The government asked you about immunity, so let's get into that. You explained that as an attorney, you understand that when the government gives a subpoena for somebody to testify, that it conveys immunity, right?
That's my understanding. My knowledge of criminal law dates back to 2003 when I took a semester in law school. So forgive me.
Graduated law school, right?
This isn't my area of law.
When you clerked on the 11th Circuit, it was with Judge Jordan, right?
I did immigration appeals.
Yeah, but you still dealt with criminal stuff as well, too.
Very little.
So your understanding, though, is it doesn't mean they can't arrest you. They just can't use what you say here against you later on. So you're protected.
Correct.
And you needed that to testify, right?
It's just given to testify. It's not a question of whether I needed it. It comes with testifying.
You fear being charged by them. So you need to have that protection of
I
your
don't
words.
fear being charged for a crime I didn't commit. No.
Now, y'all had this nice exchange where it was pleasant, but there's actually tension between you and this office, right?
No.
They recently had your brother, Charles Adelson, arrested, and he's in custody, right?
Correct.
For first-degree murder.
Correct.
And there's no tension?
It's very uncomfortable to be here. It's hard to tell where the tension is coming from.
They've discussed your involvement in this case. They insinuated it on the direct examination. There's no tension?
Lots of media insinuates that I did something I didn't do too. I can't feel tension towards every person in the world.
That's funny. I thought you didn't look at anything.
I don't. That's why.
But you know that you know about the media, but you don't know about the media?
I know about the media because it keeps me from employment. It keeps me from lots of things in my life. I'm aware of what's there, but I don't read the minutia so I can sleep at night.
Ms. Adelson, 5 minutes ago you said you don't look at any of that stuff.
I
Now I
don't
asked you a
look at
question.
it.
Let me finish.
Sure.
5 minutes ago you say you don't look at any of that stuff. Now I ask you a question, you say you look at stuff.
That's not actually what I said. I said I'm aware that it exists, but I don't read it. I don't listen to it.
Then how do you know that they're bashing you?
You just told me they are.
I did?
Yeah.
How about this? We'll come back to it. You can think up a better answer, okay?
I'm not thinking up an answer. I'm telling you the truth. I'm sorry if you don't want to listen to it.
Your basic understanding of criminal law, though, you know that if the defense gives you a subpoena, you get no immunity.
Correction, improper question.
I'm not going beyond that question.
All right, that's the only question you can ask on that.
If I give you a subpoena, you don't get immunity, right?
Correct.
No. Your family dynamic. It is your mother and father, Harvey and Donna. There's you, you're the youngest, Charles, and then the oldest, Robert. Right?
Correct.
And he's a doctor up in New York.
Correct.
Now, the government asked you about the relationship, and you're like, we don't talk much. It's actually much deeper than that with Robert, isn't it?
We don't talk
At all.
at all.
And the reason is because your parents were so difficult about the woman that is now his wife.
That is not the reason why we don't talk.
I'm not talking about the reason why you don't talk. Let me clarify. The reason why your parents don't talk to him.
That's not the reason why they don't talk with them.
Are you saying to this jury that there wasn't a problem where they outright objected to his marriage of a woman that was not of the Jewish faith?
That was initially what happened, and then there was actually a beautiful reconciliation, and they're very happy about the marriage.
Robert and his wife, not your family.
Robert and his wife and our family were very happy about Robert's marriage.
So what happens is that Robert is in love with a woman. Your parents object. He breaks up with her and then dates a Jewish woman, right?
And then they got married and divorced, and then he got back together with the person he wanted to be married to. Yes.
With his true love.
Yes.
But there was a lot of tension in your family because of your family's involvement in the kids' marriages, right?
Yes.
Let's talk briefly about your children. The government had asked you in the topic of the Jewish faith, keeping kosher. You mentioned a bat mitzvah at one point in time. You're currently planning a bat mitzvah for your oldest, right?
No, it already happened.
Okay, now that is a very, Christopher, I'm obviously not Jewish, but my understanding is that it is a very, very important thing in the Jewish faith.
It's a very important milestone.
And for those that are very conservative in the Jewish faith, those that keep kosher, so to speak, it's even bigger.
I don't know that it's more important to one segment of Judaism over another, but it's an important coming of age ceremony.
It's where a boy becomes a man. Did you invite Dan Markel's parents, the kids' grandparents?
I did.
You invited them?
I invited them, yes.
When was the last time they saw face-to-face their grandchildren?
April 20th.
Of this year?
Just now.
And you agree with me that it had been years since 2016 since the last time they had seen them?
The visit stopped when they threatened to put my children in foster care, yes. But up until that point, they did have visits.
But you got no problem letting them see your brother Charles, right?
I'm sorry?
You have no problem letting them hang out with your brother Charles, who's now sitting in custody for first-degree murder.
Oh, they can't see him now, can they?
No, they can't, but I'll ask the questions. For years, they weren't able to see their grandchildren despite their pleading to you to see them. But you let me finish, but you let them hang out with your murdering brother, right?
The children were permitted to see their grandparents. I cooked for them. We had play dates. They had sleepovers. When a letter surfaced that they were trying to have my children placed in foster care, the visits stopped. My brother never threatened to put my children in foster care, and if he had, the visits would have stopped with him too.
You say you love your boys.
I do say I love my children.
Don't care about the father that they love.
I never said that I don't care about the father that they
Then
love.
look at some of the discovery and help figure it out.
Excuse me?
Then look at some of the evidence and help figure it out so that more lives aren't ruined by this.
I seem to not understand.
You need to ask a question now. You're making statements now. You need to ask a question.
Understood, Your Honor. If I could have one brief second to check with co-counsel. We started this by saying that this is all about you. It started with you because of this marriage, right?
No. Well, you had tried to say that, but I don't agree.
Ms. Adelson, I'm going to make one final attempt through questions to implore you. You understand that you can't protect your brother Charles, who's going through this case, and protect yourself at the same time. You understand that, right?
I'm here to share the truth with you. I don't know how to answer the question.
Then please end the madness and share the truth. Will you please share the truth with this jury?
I've been sharing the truth since I walked in here. I've done nothing but share the truth.
You know what happened here, despite your claims to the jury that you haven't looked at anything, you haven't discussed with anybody, and you haven't confronted your brother. You know what happened here, right?
I do not know what happened here, and if I did, I would have shared it with the police 8 years ago.
You know that your brother went behind your back, don't you?
I do not.
Like he always does. This is something that he has always done, isn't it?
Not.
You found out after that your brother had done this and gone behind your back. That's why you were thrown up at that dinner, right?
No, it's not.
You know that it didn't involve Katie either, right?
I don't know anything about
If you're not going to say all of that and finally give the truth, why don't you just admit to this jury that you're guilty?
because I'm not guilty.
One brief moment, Donna. I got nothing for you, Judge.
Redirect.
No, sir, she's free to go about her business.
All right, you're free to go. Thank you. All right, let's put Ms. Rodriguez back on the stand and complete her cross-examination at this point. Mr. DaCosta, you prepared for that?
Actually, Your Honor, we're going to waive cross on Ms. Rodriguez. Counsel and I had some conversations. We figured out another.
Because Dan Markel was murdered before the hearing. So back in the summer of 2013, when Wendi Adelson's motion for relocation was initially denied, Charlie Adelson looked into having Dan Markel killed. But as the defense correctly points out, Charlie Adelson didn't even know Katherine Magbanua back in 2013. And hence, the murder did not happen back in 2013. The murder did not happen until Katherine Magbanua came into the picture. The murder did not happen until Katherine Magbanua made it happen. And what about the timing of when Wendi Adelson stood in the kitchen and told Jeffrey Lacoste, "Can I tell you something in confidence? My brother did seriously look into having Dan Markel killed." That statement was made in 2014, just 5 days before Dan Markel was murdered by a hitman. So the seed for this conspiracy was planted when Charlie Adelson began looking into committing the murder in the summer of 2013, after the judge ruled against Wendi's relocation. And it continued to grow when all efforts to coerce and bully Dan Markel into permitting this relocation failed. Then it further festered with this motion to have no contact with grandma unsupervised. And as Wendi relayed to Jeffrey Lacoste just 5 days before the murder, she was never going to be able to resolve this problem unless something happened to Danny. But this conspiracy took root when Charlie Adelson met somebody that could get it done. Someone who was in a position of trust in his life, a person that was his girlfriend, this defendant. And Katherine Magbanua had ties to the kind of people who were willing and able to walk up to a complete stranger and point a gun at his head and pull the trigger twice. And guess what wasn't a problem once Dan Markel was gone? Relocation. A couple days after the murder, Wendi Adelson and her boys are living within walking distance from the Adelson residence at the Icon. Their names were changed from Markel to Adelson. And just like that, their father was erased from their lives, 2 and 3 years old. No more fights over kosher diets, no more squabbles over marital assets, and no more Dan Markel. And they might have gotten away with it if it wasn't for Mr. Geiger, who bothered to be a good neighbor on July 18, 2014, and investigate a situation that was really none of his business because something just didn't seem right. His description of that Prius was critical to this investigation, that identification of that suspect vehicle, a Prius that would later be detected following Dan Markel earlier that day at the gym. They might have gotten away with it if not for the tireless efforts of law enforcement to cull through the mountains of records and data that were collected in this case, really just looking for needles in a haystack. And they found a few. For example, they found Sigfredo Garcia's phone number amongst the hundreds of numbers present at or near the gym that day. They cross-referenced that number with all the call detail records collected from all the Adelsons, which bore a single hit. We discussed in jury selection that although you will not be asked to decide the guilt of anyone other than this defendant, it's going to be necessary for you to understand the roles of each person that's involved and each player that's involved in this case in order to understand how it is that this defendant fits into this conspiracy. And we get to her through these people in two ways, or by two different paths. Path one, the Prius. The Prius led Garcia and Rivera, and those two led to McBanua. Notice how we get it right in reference to Garcia. We get it right in reference to Rivera. We get it right in reference to Charlie Adelson. And you've heard quite a lot about the government's theory. They call us the government because nobody likes the government. And per the defense, our theory is completely correct in all regards except for one. We got it all right except for her. Got it wrong on her. Everything is not as it appears when it comes to her. And the defense has characterized this investigation as biased. Luis Rivera and Jessica Rodriguez are liars. The cops and prosecutors are all crooked. But please remember that what the lawyers say is not evidence. You must look to the evidence alone in deciding your verdict. And what the evidence has shown is that we had a law enforcement team that had a lot of work to do with a lot of details and a lot of pieces that we had to sort of try to distill for you into one cognizable presentation. And that's what we've attempted to do. The law enforcement team managed to pull a single Prius out of a haystack of Priuses and tie it to two men, one of whom is the defendant's children's father, and the other of whom took the witness stand and told you that she's the mastermind behind this whole thing. The second path this investigation took was the motive. Who wanted to kill Dan Markel? The ex-wife and the in-laws hated his guts and are also connected to this defendant. The woman who knew people who could get a thing like this done. This is the defendant's day in court, and we talked at jury selection about the importance of focusing on her and her role. I know that's been hard to do because the proceedings sometimes felt like we were talking about other people the whole time. And I encourage you to consider the fact that it's easy to point at an empty chair. It's easy to pile on to bad actors when those folks are not represented in court. And I think one of the lawyers pointed out, oh, their lawyers are out there in the audience watching. And, you know, it suits the defendant's purposes in this trial to pile on to everybody else. Everybody else is guilty, 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 guilty. That one did it, but not me. I don't know anything. You better believe that when it is time for one of those other actors to be tried in court, it'll be a dogfight just like it was here, except it'll be, she's guilty. I'm not guilty. I didn't do anything. She acted on her own. All I did was make a joke, and she went and hauled off and hired a hitman. So let's review what we can agree on in this case. We got it right that the motive for killing Dan Markel was for the benefit of Wendi Adelson. We got it right that the in-laws were desperate to move her to South Florida and had the money and the audacity to actually do this kind of thing. We got it right that Charlie paid with his stapled money. And we got it right that Luis Rivera and Sigfredo Garcia were paid to kill Dan Markel. It's natural for you to find yourself wondering, you know, what's going on with all these other people? You know, it's okay, it's natural, it's human for you to have feelings and emotions about the case, the people involved, the lawyers involved. You can think Luis Rivera should not have gotten a deal, or Luis Rivera's deal was too great. You can think other people should be arrested, other people should be prosecuted. That's fine. You just have to separate those emotions out and weigh your verdict, base your verdict solely on the evidence in this case against this defendant. As we talked about in jury selection, you're asked to make a wise and legal decision solely about her role in this. Was this crime committed? And was she one of the people that committed this crime? Anyone else is for another day and another jury. But you just can't talk about the case without talking about all of them. It's the Adelsons that had a motive to get this murder done so that Wendi could move. You will not be asked to decide about them, but the evidence is clear that the thing was ultimately done for Wendi. Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera were told that it was for Wendi. They believed they were doing it for Wendi. Possibly because that's true. I mean, ultimately it was for Wendi, but also possibly because the person that hired them, this defendant, was walling Charlie off from them. Walling Sigfredo off from knowing that the money was coming from Charlie, the boyfriend, the dentist. The TV is the first piece of code that we hear in this case. Charlie Adelson got Wendi a TV as a divorce present, as a cheaper alternative to hiring a hitman. Then the same TV is her alibi for the murder, a service appointment that her mother set up for her from South Florida, or at least there's some indication of that. And then on the wire, when Donna Adelson is speaking in code in that first call, weird thing to do after being approached by an alleged gangster, she says this TV is going to cost about $5,000, referring to the $5,000 on the note that the undercover handed her. It's obvious they're referring to their conspiracy and hearkening back to this TV as code for the murder of Dan Markel. The players in this case are very smart. The crime in this case was given a lot of thought and preparation. We know that the seed was planted for this thing almost a year or more before it came to fruition. They thought of everything: a clever TV-related alibi for Wendi, a frame job for Lacoste, bullet bourbon, and they insulated themselves by hiring this defendant as a middleman between them, the ones that wanted it done, and the shooters. Everyone on the board in this case had some limits to their knowledge. And that was really smart. That made this case much harder to break. But don't let the way that they thought they would get away with this case be the way they get away with this case.
It's close to that, where you can say, yes, Miss McBanua had something to do with it. And that's because she is innocent. That's why, members of the jury, that evidence doesn't exist because she is not guilty. That is how Miss McBanua sits here today, living the worst nightmare that anyone on this planet could imagine. Sitting in a jail for a crime you did not commit, knowing all the while that all you have to do to go home is lie. I'm involved and Charlie got me to do this. She got up here and told you herself, I believe he's guilty. I want him to pay for what he did to Dan Markel and also for getting me involved in this nonsense. And all she'd have to do is lie, members of the jury. That's it. She's not Luis Rivera. No matter what she did, she has stuck to the truth every single time. And she's not going to sink to his level just to buy her freedom. This is another question that Miss Katherine, when she gets back up here, is not going to be able to answer you. Why in the world would Katherine not cooperate if she were guilty? Why? She's going to come up here and speculate, maybe this and that. She told you you can't use speculation. What evidence can she show you to say is a legitimate reason why? If she knows that's all they want, if she were guilty, why wouldn't she take the deal? Why? She's going to sit in jail and take her chances on a first-degree murder case with 2 other first-degree solicitation and conspiracy charges? You heard Luis Rivera that he was facing the death penalty on one of those charges. I'm not saying she was, but that's just to show you the level of severity that she is facing. And all she would have to do is just say, yeah, I'm going to tell you your truth. And she could go home. But she's not Luis Rivera. If she does not come up here, Ms. Kappelman, and give you that explanation, something reasonable, something that's based on evidence, it's not guilty, members of the jury. Because there's no reasonable explanation why a guilty person wouldn't take that deal. That is evidence of her innocence. That unreliable word of Luis Rivero and nothing more. Go back and listen to the Dolce Vita. That's how confident I am, because I know for a fact there's nothing on there, because she is innocent. Justice for Dan Markel is not convicting an innocent person of this crime. In fact, it would be a travesty of justice to convict Miss McBanua of any of the charges in this case. She is across the board not guilty. And remember, she had nothing to do with this. That's what we're telling you. Nothing, no part of it. The state is throwing all of these charges at you, hoping and praying that just one of them will stick. That's all they want, just one. But I'm telling you, she is not guilty of all three. Because if she didn't know, members of the jury, she's not guilty. You cannot convict her for having awful taste in men. You cannot convict her because the father of her children is a scumbag. You cannot convict her because she ended up dating Charles Adelson, probably one of the worst human beings on the face of the planet. She didn't know, members of the jury. And what the evidence in this case has proven to you is that she is not guilty of every single count. Please take the time to evaluate the evidence in this case. We have come this far. I'm confident that when you all sit there and you go over everything for yourself, you're going to see that she didn't do this, members of the jury. She's innocent. Find her not guilty.
Thank you, Ms. Claus.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Kappelman, state rebuttal. You have
Yes.
10 minutes.
So unfortunately, I cannot take up Mrs. Colossus' invitation to explain to you why it is that criminal defendants choose to exercise their constitutional right and take a case to trial as opposed to doing a deal or taking a plea offer. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. Maybe she's getting a big payoff. Maybe somebody's threatened to do something to her. I don't know. And that's not important. I don't have to prove that to you because it's not an element of the offense in this case. Y'all really have to focus on what are the elements and have those been proven. A lot of the things that were suggested to you that I haven't proven, I don't have to prove. So I want to make sure you take a look at those elements when you get back there and think about what evidence do we have in this case to each one of those elements. The defense says none. There's nothing. We've just been sitting here for 10 days and nothing has occurred. That's going to be up to y'all. Did the case get proven? Was the evidence any good? That's up to you collectively and individually as jurors. Am I hiding things? Am I filtering things? You cannot speculate on items that did not come into evidence. The judge is the filter. What comes into evidence? This stuff over here in the testimony, you guys have to base your verdict on that. And if that's not enough, then it's insufficient evidence, lack of evidence. That can give rise to a reasonable doubt. But as far as, oh, we tried to get in this thing and y'all didn't get to hear it and they're hiding it and it must be something really good, that's speculation. That item is not in evidence because it was not admissible and you cannot speculate about it. Please do not accept their invitation to do that. Address some of the coincidences that really you have to buy in order to buy the defense theory in this case. I mean, everyone sort of agrees. You look at it and you think, yeah, she's in the middle. In order to buy the defense's theory that this evidence is not as it appears, you have to find that there are several things that are coincidences, and I'm sure you can think of a lot more, but I wrote down a few. Fact one, the defendant went to the rental car place. Okay, I mean, there's evidence she went to the rental car place. She says, no, I was visiting Kenya. But God, what a terrible coincidence that she's visiting Kenya both times that the rental car is getting rented and returned. Fact two, the money spike in this case. And you all have seen repeatedly that graph with the big spike in her cash that occurs right around the time of this murder. And she says this is not as it appears. I worked in the club. I made a lot of money. I happened to have the best month ever that month that Dan Markel was murdered, but that has nothing to do with me. The cash spike is not evidence of a crime. It's a coincidence. Or Sigfredo Garcia gave it to me. But remember that Yinder told you that the defendant went after Sigfredo Garcia for child support in January of 2015. So it's a little unbelievable that after, remember she said getting $1,000 from him would be a very significant amount of money. If she had just gotten, what is it, $13,000, $14,000, $17,000 from him between the murder and October the year prior, would she be going after him for child support in January of 2015? Is that just a, this money situation, is this just a terrible coincidence for her? Is it a terrible coincidence for her that she got placed on the payroll of the Adelson Institute and it just happened to be right after the murder, and it just happens to be that she really doesn't seem to be able to tell us what she did for it? Fact 3, Rivera flipped on her. He did. He flipped, he told what he knew, and she went under the bus as a result. Well, he's making up his testimony to comport with the reports in the case. He's a liar, he's a gangster, he's a thug. You shouldn't believe him. And she's just the unlucky victim of his made-up story to frame her. He's a liar, as are all the witnesses in the case, right? I mean, they kind of have to all be liars. Why didn't I just have Luis Rivera, since I'm also a liar and a crook who's trying to pull the wool over your eyes? Why didn't I just have Rivera say Garcia did it? Charlie Adelson did it. Why didn't I just do that? I'm desperate to get Charlie Adelson, aren't I? I'm laying awake at night wanting to do this trial again. Why don't I just get Rivera to say whatever I want? That's what I'm doing, aren't I? Fact 5, deep sea fishing. Or maybe I'm on 4. 4, deep sea fishing. Look at this text. They made a joke about deep sea fishing. The problem is, and we published State's Exhibit 133, a clip from the defendant's prior testimony where she admits that was a joke. I am unaware of any evidence that Garcia and Rivera are in direct communication, and I'm not sure why my lawyers were trying to make it look like there was a connection between those two. She didn't even get what they were trying to do. Fact 5. This is the biggest fact. I mean, she is literally in the middle. She is got a baby daddy who killed Dan Markel and a boyfriend who hired the hit. And she is to have you all believe that that is a coincidence. Her child's father, having nothing to do with her, happened to murder the brother-in-law of her boyfriend. It is often said that the best explanation is the simplest one. So we're up to 5, and I'm sure you can think of more explanations for the appearance of this case. Or one explanation, one that is simple and explains everything and is, I think, very well articulated and proven by the evidence that y'all have been held hostage and forced to listen to and see for the last 10 days. How many coincidences does it take for it to no longer be a coincidence? I want to talk about the defendant's own words. Next time, don't be such a dick to someone that has done something for you.
This is another question that Miss Katherine, when she gets back up there, is not going to be able to answer you. Why in the world would Katherine not cooperate if she were guilty?
So unfortunately, I cannot take up Mrs. Colossus' invitation to explain to you why it is that criminal defendants choose to exercise their constitutional right and take a case to trial as opposed to doing a deal or taking a plea offer. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. Maybe she's getting a big payoff. Maybe somebody's threatened to do something to her. I don't know. And that's not important. I don't have to prove that to you because it's not an element of the offense in this case. Y'all really have to focus on what are the elements and have those been proven. A lot of the things that were suggested to you that I haven't proven, I don't have to prove. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. So unfortunately, I cannot take up Mrs. Colossus' invitation to explain to you why it is that criminal defendants choose to exercise their constitutional right and take a case to trial as opposed to doing a deal or taking a plea offer. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. Maybe she's getting a big payoff. Maybe somebody's threatened to do something to her. I don't know. And that's not important. I don't have to prove that to you because it's not an element of the offense in this case. Y'all really have to focus on what are the elements and have those been proven. A lot of the things that were suggested to you that I haven't proven, I don't have to prove. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. Maybe she thinks she has very talented lawyers. Maybe she thinks she has a good chance of walking out of here. Maybe she thinks if she gets convicted, she'll offer to do something for me then. We'll see how that goes. You're re-entering the courtroom.
All right, please be seated. Juror number 4, are you the foreperson?
Yes.
And has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes.
If you could please hand the verdict form to the bailiff. Thank you. All right, the verdict appears to be in proper form. I will now read the verdict. In the case of the state of Florida versus Katherine D. Magbanua, case number 2016 CF 3036 and 2018 CF 497, we, the jury, find as follows as to count 1. A, the defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2. A, the defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 3. A, the defendant is guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. And it is signed and dated by the foreperson. Out of the courtroom, the door is closed. Please be seated. We're still in session. Ms. Magbanua, you have been found guilty of the 3 counts. Count 1 of first-degree murder, count 2 of the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and count 3 of the solicitation to commit first-degree murder. We are going to set this for sentencing, and Ms. Magbanua is entitled to a pre-sentence investigation. Are you requesting that, Mr. DeCoste?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so she's entitled to that. That will take approximately a month. And lately it's been taking even a little bit longer. So we will have that pre-sentence investigation ordered, and I will have that before the court. So we're going to set sentencing off for approximately 30 days, and then we'll get it scheduled. My assistant will be in touch with both parties, and we'll set for sentencing at that time. All right. Ms. Kappelman, anything else for the court?
No, Your Honor.
Anything else from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right. We'll be in recess then until sentencing. Thank you.
Very serious.
Thank you for watching today's deep dive. If you found this case interesting or have any thoughts, feel free to leave a comment below. Remember, this community thrives on smart and respectful discussion. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay on track with our new case videos. We cover new details, court hearings, interviews, interrogations, and more. This is Maya with Deep Dive True Crime and Mentor Lawyer Justice Network, and I'll see you all in the next video.